This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I call the meeting to order, and Jolene, you want to take roll call?
I will. Trustee Gilbert.
Present.
Lee Reader.
Present.
President Abdus.
Here.
President Baines.
Here.
President Barandis.
Brandis here.
Burns.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Everybody's here.
Okay, good news. Anybody want to move for approval of the agenda or any changes?
I'll move approval.
Just move
Second.
approval. Second was
A
allowed.
second.
Okay, why don't you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance.
Wait, before we do that,
Oh.
we just need to have confirmation from the rest of the trustees, a vote on approval agenda. We have a motion by Director Burns or Trustee Burns, second by Trustee Lee Reader. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
And
Agenda's approved. Thank you.
Kevin, just a friendly reminder that under these modified COVID rules, all votes are supposed to be roll call. And I don't
Okay.
think we need it for the agenda, but let's do it, make sure we do it for all substantive items, okay?
Yes, absolutely. I think we've been doing that,
Yes.
aside from once, yeah. So thank you, Scott, for the reminder. Appreciate that. Back to you, Tom, on 1.4.
Okay, let's go with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
which
it
is
stands,
one nation under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty and justice
for all.
for all. Two. Thank you. Okay. Any conflicts of interest?
I will need to recuse myself from consent item 5.5.
Any others? Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Tom. No presentations scheduled for this morning. It doesn't look like we have anyone from the public on, but if there's any trustees that would like to make a public comment on non-agendized items, you may do so now. Hearing none, on to item 4.1, General Manager's Report. The report's provided in the packet. Nothing extraordinary to point out aside from I did execute the funding agreement for FMAP for next year. So hopefully that gets executed by the state. They've been a little bit better in every year during this program. And hopefully we get the funding a little bit sooner than later. And we can start primarily on what we're going to use FMAP funds for next year is the SWIFT implementation. We'll talk a little bit more about SWIFT implementation on item 6.1. But the sooner we have the money, the better. And there's actually some portion in that FMAP agreement that allows for some outreach. We'll talk about that again on item 6.1 for the SWIFT implementation. But essentially, the sooner we get that money in, the sooner we can abate those encroachments on Garden Highway and really help move us forward with that implementation and what we've agreed to do for those encroachments. So with that, are there any questions on the General Manager's report? Oh, I do want to point out we're still due for a finance committee meeting. We have 3 consultants working for us right now on 3 separate items and getting those all aligned. Hopefully, and I've sent out to the finance committee kind of a hold for 2 dates, November 22nd and November 23rd. And I've let all the consultants know that we need that information a week ahead of time. So we're looking for those reports to come in next week so I can get it out to the finance committee meeting. And that's for our cost allocation plan, MBS's 2.1 report on our comprehensive financial plan, as well as our financial audit. So we'll try to take those up at the Finance Committee meeting, either the 22nd or 23rd, and then tee it up for our December board meeting for approval. Well, I guess it's receive and file for the audit decision on item 2 or phase 2.1 of MBS, and then review and discussion on the cost allocation plan from Matrix Consulting. And so that has to deal with our fee for overhead costs and indirect rates that we apply for work done for others and reimbursables. So just wanted to update the Finance Committee on that and the rest of the trustees that just tying those three things together. MBS has requested some data for us after they provided a draft report to us in October per their schedule. Staff marked it up and, had a discussion with them on that report and kind of approach moving forward to, concluding 2.1. There were some assumptions in there about how we structure the rate distribution and the baseline fee and how customer classes are differentiated. Our existing fee and assessment was from an era long gone. So the approach is a bit different in identifying benefits. So there was an additional data request from MBS to provide some customer information to kind of tie in who's benefiting from these different zones and kind of basin-wide costs. So we provided that data to them. I do have a response from them that they should be ready on the deadline to schedule that Finance Committee meeting and have the report to me next week. So that's all I have. Any questions? All right, easy group. Thank you. Moving on to item 4.2. We get here. There we go. Operations Manager's Report. Gabe. I see Gabe's on, but. All right, so any questions on Operations Manager's Report? Gabe provided a little bit different in his attachments. We did do the Steelhead Creek cleanup and removed, I think it was about 48,000 pounds of debris. We coordinated that with Central Valley Flood Protection Board and American River. So this is some of the debris before and after pictures. And I believe that I had emailed this out to the trustees a couple weeks after the cleanup event occurred. And so, really good. Very fortunate we removed all this debris before that historic event that we had at the end of October. I can tell you there were probably about 80 camps down in the bottom of Steelhead Creek. Gabe and I did some levee patrols the morning after that significant event, and there were only about 10 tents or camps that had moved up to the levee system. And so we're hopeful that those individuals that were, living down there in the creek got out and out to safety. But the amount of debris that was left after our cleanup efforts, to see, very low percentage of that up on the levee system probably means that the rest of those encampments got washed out from rapidly rising floodwaters. So we're just hopeful that those individuals got out and got to safety and maybe into some shelter. But we'll see once the water levels go down what's left.
Hey, Kevin, if I can comment on that, I mean, I appreciate all that, but I'll tell you, and in sort of over in the Valley View Acres area, Main Avenue and East Levee Road, there is a god awful amount of debris within the channel, probably south of the Main Avenue Bridge. I don't know if you've been out there lately. It's pretty appalling.
That's of the pumping plant, correct?
Yeah, that's yes. All the stuff that got washed out. And yeah, we got a pretty significant camp up on East Levee Road and Main Avenue. It's pretty bad, but at least in so far as the debris is concerned, I mean, I don't know if there's another cleanup that is considered, but it is really, really bad, so yeah. So I'd say drive by to take a look.
Organized to this point and have been kind of downstream of the pumping plant with American River and other interests from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board for that section of Steelhead Creek where they're trying to reestablish some habitat. not much effort's been paid or close attention to anything upstream of the pumping plant, but that's certainly something that we could work into the budget and maybe get a coalition together to kind of fund some of that cleanup. And you know, you and I did have a conversation earlier this week once East Levee Road opened up again about some concerns from the community that you'd received. So I did have Gabe and Tony go out there and take a look. And we'll try to address what we can, at least up on the levee prism, and maybe even coordinate with DWR on, you know, in channel or the Centralized Flood Protection Board moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Please kind of keep me in the loop on those discussions. Yeah, I've gotten a few more calls from concerned, you know, neighbors. You know, having the levee road open up again obviously put the spotlight on something that's been there for a while, but
Right.
it's something definitely that we need to talk about. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to let you know, I did talk to the Gardenland Northgate Neighborhood Association last night. They had some similar concerns, you know, particularly in their neighborhood about the levee and the blight on top of the levee. I explained to them, you know, the legislation we've been trying to get done and about the city ordinance that was approved, but because of COVID. So they were a sympathetic ear, obviously, but, you know, these things kind of, you know, explode out of control if left unattended. So it was encouraging that there was a lieutenant from SAC PD that attends their meetings monthly as well and gives them an update. So it seems like they're building, at least SAC PD has a good rapport with this group. And so maybe we can partnership on them on future abatement efforts of these things and continue to do what we can until the city ordinance is, you know, in effect. So. Any questions on the operations manager report?
Kevin, is there somewhere we mentioned the 2x2 with Thomas Mutual?
Yeah, that would be item 7.11.
Okay.
On committee reports.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to item 4.3, Scott.
Thank you, Kevin. Not much to report on this month. For me, Rebecca did a little bit of work, as the trustees saw, on responding to a question regarding Brown Act compliance for a previous meeting. But beyond that, really haven't been doing much work for the district this month. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Scott. On to consent calendar. I would entertain a motion to approve, or go ahead, Chris. I saw your mic.
Oh, no, I was going to make a motion. I was going to ask how you wanted to separate it out so that way Nick.
Yeah, so I would accept a motion for approval on items 5.1 through 5.4. And then we'll take item 5.5 separately so Nick can recuse himself.
Well, I'll move approval 5.1 to 5.4 and 5.6.
Oh, sorry, yes.
For the consent calendar.
Thanks, Chris, I forgot.
Second.
Second by Jones, thank you. Jolene, will you take roll call on the motion to approve consent calendar 5.1 through 5.4 and 5.6?
Yes, trustee Gilbert.
Aye.
Gilbert, I. Lee Reader.
Aye.
Lee Reader, I. Abdus.
Aye.
Abdus, I. Baines.
Aye.
Baines, I. Barandis.
Barandis, aye.
Barandis, I. Burns.
Burns, aye.
Burns, I. Jones.
Jones, aye.
Jones, I. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Jolene. Scott, I believe this may be the first recusal that we've had since we've been doing go-to meetings or virtual meetings. I think as long as Nick, his video and mute are on, that we should be able to take this up. He would just be essentially absent from the meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, the rules require that the trustee not be in a visual or audio position to be able to influence the other trustees. So I think you've got it exactly right. Nick's turned off his camera. He has his microphone off. No one can see if he is winking or nodding his head or anything like that. And so you all now can vote, and then he can come back on afterwards. And Jolene will just record that that not only did he abstain, that also his microphone and his camera was off.
Thank you, Scott.
I have a question.
Yes.
In this era, we have so many different platforms. I think I use at least 3 or 4: Zoom, GoTo, Microsoft Teams. Is there the ability to put Nick in a separate room? To create a
So
room?
yeah, so on GoToMeeting, they are developing that feature to put people in waiting rooms. They don't have it yet. I do know that Zoom does have that ability. GoToMeeting has, at least in my opinion, has some more professional features in it that allow us to do a number of different things, and it's a platform that we've been using in the yearly subscription that we pay for. So I think for
Yeah.
this purpose, yeah.
Yeah, Teams is like that as well. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So item 5.5, I had an email from Mark Rogers, who is the project engineering firm for the Greenbrier Development Project. Apparently during approvals back in 2019 for phase 1 and phase 2 of their project, all the conditions and original plan sets had been identified, and apparently these 2 quit claim of grant easement deeds were missed, and as they're going to close out their phase 2 with the city, it was realized that these 2 quit claims in the original plans hadn't been quit claimed by the district. So hence the item today. Like I said, all the other approvals had gotten done except these 2. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll move item 5.5.
I'll second it.
Motion by Burns, second by Baines. Jolene, will you take roll?
Yes, trustee Gilbert.
Aye.
Gilbert, aye. Lee Reader.
Aye.
Lee Reader, aye. Abjus abstain and recused. Baines.
Aye.
Baines, aye. Barandis.
Barandis, aye.
Barandis, aye. Burns.
Burns eye.
Burns, aye. Jones.
Jones, aye.
Jones, aye. Thank you. Motion's approved.
All right, thank you, Jolene. Nick, you're welcome to join us back.
Thank you.
All right, so item 6.1, review and consider budget amendment for fiscal year 2021, 2022. There are 2, actually there's 3, contracts here, but 2 that require a budget amendment. Those being for Allen Strategic for the district funding initiative, the outreach program, as we work in consultation with MBS. Originally, when we approved the MBS contract, the trustees wanted to hire an outside third firm that was local for public outreach for that portion and not rely on MBS's proposal for outreach for this effort. And so we went through a RFQ process for selection of a strategic communications firm. We selected Allen Strategic back in, I believe it was August or September. Been working on scopes of services for them for two projects. Essentially, it would be the district funding initiative as well as the SWIFT outreach and implementation plan. Originally, during budget time, we had budgeted our kind of standard amount for public outreach of $25,000, and that was mainly to cover what we've been doing in previous years as far as our social media that we've been doing internally, any community events and stuff like that. We were in the process of the RFQ in the middle of receiving and making award of a contract for an outreach firm during the budget process. So it was known that $25,000 probably wouldn't be enough, but we would come back to the board with individual scope tasks as the need arise. And so these are the results of that. There's 2 of them, again, for the district funding initiative, as well as the SWIFT outreach and implementation. So staff is requesting to have the board review and consider those two scopes of work for Allen Strategic, and make a budget amendment of an increase of $195,000 for the public relations consulting line item in the budget to take a total of $220,000 for outreach for this fiscal year. The third item is pumping plant 8 preliminary design from KSN. In the budget for the CIP portion of the budget this year, we had $1 million budgeted for design and engineering work. We received this proposal back from KSN after meeting with them to review and discuss how we could phase that project. Trustee Baines, we specifically asked KSN, based on your previous comments, to look at ways that we could phase that project out at good stages, so that we didn't have to come up with $25 million up front, as well as be prepared with pre-engineering for any potential grants or any grants or loans that might be available. We can pull that project off the shelf. So this is within budget, but it is a significant item, and I wanted to make sure that I had board authority to sign that and get going on the preliminary design work for pumping plant 8, and now to look at how we can kind of phase it out as well as do the design work. And so even if the our fee and assessment process is unsuccessful later down the road, this is work that will eventually need to get done. So all this engineering work is not just work that we just throw away based on the results of the fee or assessment decision later on, but will be on the shelf and at some point will be used. So engineering work ahead of time. Any questions from the trustees on this item?
I'd request the split the vote out on the PR fee outreach budget item, please. Or make
Okay,
a motion.
so perhaps, Chris, based on that suggestion, if everyone's okay with the KSN, is there a motion to authorize the general manager to execute the contract with KSN, and then we'll take up the other items separately?
I'll move that particular item.
I'll
I
second.
second.
Motion by Abdus, second by Baines. He beat you again, Elena. Jolene, will you take roll call on the motion to approve the general manager execute contract with KSN for Plant 8?
Yes. Trustee Gilbert,
Yes.
Lee Reader,
Aye.
Lee Reader, I. Aptis,
Aye.
I. Baines,
Aye.
Barandis,
Brandis, aye.
Burns,
Burns, aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Jones, aye. Motion is approved.
All right, thank you, Jolene. So the other two items for the two PR, Trustee Burns, did you want to talk about each one individually and take them up, or you want to take them up as collective?
No, I just wanted the fee outreach one separated is all the one I wanted to separate.
Okay. All right, so if there's a motion to approve the SWIFT outreach, we'll do that.
I'll move that.
I
Motion
second.
by Abbott, second by Lee Reader. You got it in there. Jillian, will you take roll? The motion is to approve the Allen Strategic contract and authorize the general manager to award that contract for the SWIFT outreach and implementation.
Yes. Trustee Gilbert,
Aye.
Gilbert, I. Lee Reader,
Aye.
Lee Reader, I. Aptis,
Aye.
Aptis, I. Baines,
Aye.
Barandis.
Brandis, aye.
Thank you. Burns,
Aye.
Burns, I. Jones,
Aye.
Jones, I. Motion is approved.
All right, thank you, Jillian. I apologize, Chris. I thought when you said PR, it was the both of them. So, all right, so the district funding initiative, if there's discussion from the trustees, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Tom, I'm going to mute you while you staple your papers together.
So I'll mute myself.
So Kevin, I have a question on the timing. Obviously we've gone down the path of establishing the pretty significant funding shortfall in the coming years for district operations, and obviously with the CIP. We haven't seen the NBS report recommendation yet. Is this putting the cart before the horse a little bit, only because it is a significant contract amount? I know it needs to be done. I guess from my perspective, I don't know if it matters or not yet, if, what type of proposal we're going to be doing outreach on. Frankly, we haven't voted on that yet, right? So can you talk a little bit about the need for the timing on this thing?
Yeah, so originally in the MBS contract, they had included in their contract and proposal in response to our RFQ process some outreach, and the trustees felt that during that process, to remove from the scope of work for MBS for phase 1 of that project, even phase 2, was to eliminate the public outreach portion from that proposal and hire a third-party firm, local, that knew local, key stakeholders and things like that. So we went through that whole process to hire a strategic outreach coordinator. And I think timing-wise, had we been under contract with MBS and not taken that approach with, hiring a separate outreach firm, then we'd already be under contract for some of this outreach activity as we're going through these phasing. And the consultant would already be working on a strategy and a plan and have materials ready, so that when drafts of these drafts of these documents are made public, that you'd already have, materials ready and you'd be ready to go. So having separated it off, I think it is critical to get Allen Strategic on board and start developing the materials before those draft reports are made public. We have provided the draft reports that we've received as staff to Allen Strategic, and independent on whether it's fee or assessment, and that's the decision that the board's going to be making hopefully in December if MBS gets the report to me in time to make that meeting and the finance committee agrees. But independent on whether it's fee or assessment, your outreach would pretty much look the same. Functionality, you may approach different groups, but you're still, at least in our opinion, going to want to do the same amount of outreach that is provided here. So this is independent on whether it's fee or assessment. And even so, if the board decides after that fee or assessment not to enter into phase 2.2 and continue on with the rates, the way this contract would be set up, or is set up, it's a time and materials basis, so we would just pause. So it's not a lump sum contract to Allen Strategic for $150,000. It's really on the general manager to kind of manage that time underneath, not to exceed the 150 amount, and then we can kind of gauge where we're going throughout this whole process. So if it's not putting anything ahead, in fact, in my estimation, I think we're a little bit behind in that, we would have these with MBS, we'd already have some of these materials and have spent some of this money already. So I hope that answers your question, Nick.
Yeah, it does. I have a follow-up question in terms of, again, this board hasn't taken action on, despite the fact that we've approved a CIP and kind of that phase 1 finance plan, we haven't voted on a path forward. So I guess my question is, really what we're approving today is, a T&M contract, that is going to include outreach in the next 30 days to stakeholders, at the table for, to basically receiving the NBA, whether it's a fee or an assessment. So it sounds like some outreach needs to be done there. I guess
Right.
That's a month, so it doesn't seem like a ton of work, but I do think that there is certainly benefit in doing some outreach before things become public on an agenda, and folks get blindsided. I certainly don't want that. But is the contract set up in a manner that if this board decides not to proceed with a fee or an assessment, that the contract can in essence be, you said pause, but I guess I would say, can it be canceled?
Yeah, absolutely.
At that point, I mean, how does
Yeah, absolutely. We can. I want the board to know kind of the full scope of this program, right? We're trying to put together this, this big program if we decide to continue to move forward. But if that decision point on the fee or assessment or future rate, decision is not taken up by the board, then we would just not continue to work on this project. So it'd be over. We wouldn't authorize Allen Strategic to do anything else other than they've already done. And like I said, it is T&M. So we would provide notice for 30 days that, under the contract agreement, and hey, we're, no longer doing this. It's not a guaranteed 150K. So you're 100% correct. We could just stop it at any time.
I don't have any other questions right now.
Kevin, I just want to get this straight in my head. We have already awarded a contract to Allen Strategic to do our PR work, and correct? And this is a separate piece focused on this particular outreach, yes?
Correct.
So this approval of this item amends their current contract?
So the way that we set up this contract with Allen Strategic was that we would ask them, and it's similar to the way that we handle with Mead and Hunt for our engineering services. When something comes up, we ask them for a scope, and then in contracting procedures, we would then approve a work release for them. If this had been under the general manager's, approval authority, probably would have developed that scope, received a quote from them, and issued a work release, because we already competitively bid their qualifications and their fee, their rates, and we knew what those were. As long as I'm within budget and underneath my approval authority, had the scope been, a de minimis amount, we'd just issue that work release. Frequently, what we do with Mead and Hunt on their engineering work is things come up that's unexpected. They give us a quote, we issue a work release and track those costs. So with Allen Strategic, it's the same process. This one just happens to be a larger dollar amount that we want board approval on to make sure. So they're under contract. We know their rates. We don't have to competitively bid every time we want to go out and do the SWIP implementation, or for this one, the fee implementation, and go through and hire, different outreach firms. So
Kevin and
Is this, I'm not clear though, is this an amendment to the existing contract to address this additional scope of work? And also, point of clarification, what is your contracting authority?
yeah, I believe the purchasing authority is $20,000.
Okay.
I believe in the current policy.
Maybe I can jump in and answer the first of Deborah's questions from a legal perspective, and also make one other point. So technically, it's not an amendment to the contract. It is if you will, a sub order of an existing authorized contract. So there is a contract which says, we will give you work under the following terms and conditions. And this is simply meeting those terms and conditions, assuming the board authorizes it. In some public agencies, it's considered a task order. It just depends upon how agencies look at it. And the only other thing I wanted to note was, Kevin, in your explanation, you talked about that the contract creates the opportunity to give work to the contractor without the need to competitively bid. And I'll just note that technically it's not competitively bid. It's really a qualifications-based determination.
Sure.
Under California law for public agencies, it's anything that's construction or manual labor related does have to be competitively bid, because it's believed that those services are fungible, that person A and person B doing it is the same, and so price becomes basically the most important factor. Anything that's professional services, engineering, accounting, outreach, those kinds of things, it's really a qualifications based. And you can actually hire the most expensive one if you wanted, because in theory they had qualifications that mattered. And so in the event that the board wanted, for example, to say, hey, I want to have a stable of outreach consultants, it wouldn't require a bidding process. It would require them to submit statements of qualifications that the agency manager or the board approved.
Thanks for the clarification, Scott. When you said task order, that was good for me. Keep in mind that I am a consultant, that I provide professional services to public agencies. So once you said that, that made it crystal clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize. I used the term work release, but yes, task order. So thank you, Scott.
This is Burns. I just want to outline my concerns with the way this is drafted. I'm concerned that it's outreach on either a fee, well, the way it's presented and the way it's written. I'm concerned it's using ratepayer money to advocate for a fee or an assessment. If it were just like the SWIFT one that just says it's an educational outreach, or if it's an educational outreach on the CIP, I would have no problem with it. But I know that they've got little off ramps in here that claims that they're not going to do any advocacy, but the fact that it's presented as a fee outreach and the fact that it talks about promoting RD solutions, which at this point right now, the discussion is either a fee or an assessment. I'm concerned that this is using district funds for a campaign. So if it was written differently, I would have no problem with it if it was just an outreach on explaining the CIP and the necessity. So that's my concerns. I wanted to put that out. Thank you.
Kevin, I really appreciate the scope of services that Allen Strategic has put before us. It's comprehensive and it's exactly what we were looking for. I noticed I've seen multiple versions of it, and we've taken out all the bells and whistles, and it's dialed down to the necessities. And I like that as a nice starting point. So I'm comfortable with this.
All right, thank you.
No other comments or questions? A motion?
So I was I kind of lost connection there for a second. Scott, can you comment on this education versus advocacy point? I mean, you've reviewed this contract. Do you feel it passes legal muster on that issue? Because that is a fair point, and obviously we cannot engage in advocacy. That we're strictly bound to educational outreach. But can you comment on that point, please?
I agree with both you and Chris, and just for the rest of the board, in case you're not familiar, the law does allow and actually encourages the agency to educate voters on issues, but does not allow the board and the agency to advocate. So what we're talking about here is a gray area, and I can read the language as education. I can read it, as Chris identifies, as bordering on advocacy. And I think if it is a concern of the board, there are two ways you could do it. One is you could ask them to come back with a slightly different scope, which eliminates the key words that Chris has identified. You could today approve the task order, removing that. And if they were willing to do the work, then you wouldn't even have to bring it back. And the last is you could, I said two, but I guess three. And the third is you could approve it with the express understanding that they were only being directed to educate and not advocate. I think any of those would provide some level of protection to the agency. And it's really just a matter of administratively which makes the most sense. Kevin, I don't know if you have a feeling for which would make the most sense and which would allow you to move forward and get this going.
Chris, are there specific language, page reference that I think option 2 is what Scott would be my preference, is if we can strip out the language now, make sure that they understand. So sorry, you understand my question. Go ahead.
Well, no, certainly page 2, the goal itself says secure approval for RD 1000's plan to fund its CIP through comprehensive community education program. Well, if we're doing a fee or an assessment, those are the only two considerations. It says right there in the goal that it's going to reach out to people on a fee and an assessment. If that's so, that's what I'm saying. If it said, hey, the goal is to educate the public on the CIP and the need for, I like the other stuff down further that talked about flood awareness. So that's, again, it's replete throughout the contract of what I read.
Yeah, so one way of implementing that second option, Kevin, would be for the board to move approval to for you or Tom as president to approve an updated scope of work, which removes all references to securing approval and focuses instead on education. And that way you would have already delegated authority. You would ask them for an updated scope, and then you or Tom could approve it at that point.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to Nick's earlier point about timing. What is the need to do this now? Because if we have not yet determined which way we're going to go, wouldn't it be cleaner for us to take an action and make that decision and then implement this work?
Staff's opinion is no, and the reason for that is we anticipate some significant, not significant, we do anticipate some questions from the community and from others once we outwardly face the draft or make public the MBS report. We need to be prepared as staff, as you well as trustees, to answer these questions and have materials ready to have a strategic plan for communication and education on what exactly we were doing. And maybe if I've missed the mark here and you know, perhaps that's it, but I thought that, you know, we were all kind of on the same page and moving forward in the direction I received is to get this outreach in, make sure that we're prepared, make sure as staff that we're doing things ahead of time before we go public so that we're ready. And that's my concern is if we delay until after we make a financial plan item 2.1 and decide fee, the community is going to reach out and say, wait, what's this about a fee? What are you doing? What are the fees going to be? What is it, you know, what's the timing? And so, you know, as staff, we don't have that ready. This is what we're relying on the consultants to do for us. And as I mentioned earlier, if this hadn't been taken out of MBS's proposal, some of this work would already be done and in place as part of their outreach from their task order on their original proposal. So in order to keep on our timeline, if we do anticipate and keep following, you know, phase 1 of the finance plan and our CIP plan and the kind of the urgency to upgrade our facilities and have a robust and reliable system, any delays here on outreach or, you know, moving forward with MBS's reports further limits our ability to do a long-term outreach and education plan, as well as get on the county tax rolls for July 2023, if that's the way the board wants to continue to go. So if we have about a 2 or 3 month flex here, or we shorten up our outreach and education campaign, but what I've been told for the last 2.5 years is we want to do a long outreach campaign and not campaign, sorry, I use that word, but a long outreach effort to educate and talk about the need for the CIP, talk about the need for the finance plan and moving forward. So I'll do whatever you guys want to do. I've been building to this point, like I said, for about the last 1.5 years based on board direction. So.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Kevin. Since there's concern about the use of the terminology that says approval, would delaying this until the next meeting create a significant impact, just to have them go back and revise this scope, remove all of those references, and then bring it back to us? Is a month going to hurt?
It just depends on how ready you want me to be. If you want me to delay the MBS phase 2.1 fee assessment decision to January, my recommendation is that we would push that off until we had outreach in place to make that 2.1. When we make that 2.1 publicly available, my preference would be that staff is prepared and ready and has materials developed to answer questions, as well as the trustees on what we're doing, and that we have talking points about that decision. So Timing's up to you guys.
Yeah, timing is really the issue here, it appears.
Well,
Can I?
Nick?
Go ahead, Elena. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just concerned about the timing because, I think the first phase is educating the public. We have so much work to do in this area. The first part is educating them and informing them as to who we are and what services we provide. I mean, we've seen it in urbanization. It is just like we have so much to do in that area. And then the second phase is educating the public about our CIP, our crumbling infrastructure, what it looks like, what we're experiencing. Half our pumps are offline right now. As a basin, we can't afford to keep kicking the can down the road. And the third part would be, hey, after educating them about it, this is why we need to bump up, we need a little bit more funding, because where else would it come from? So I really, really worry, and based on our last election on like the voter turnout, it's concerning to me that people think we're a scam, that we're not real. I mean, it's just, we have so much to do in this area.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to me, this is a legal question. I personally don't have a problem delegating to Tom, as long as, Scott, you sign off on the language. Losing a month to bring back what is, in my opinion, a legal question. I'm for moving forward and delegating. The language does need to get buttoned up, but I think that Kevin and Tom, with Scott's oversight, can provide, I think, the guidance that's needed to finalize this so it's legally defensible. And so I don't have a problem moving forward today with that understanding.
Let me just make clear to my colleagues, the question I asked about deferring it to next month really just had to do with cleaning up this language, which seems to be problematic. If we can delegate to Tom, Tom and Kevin getting that language cleaned up, I'm fine with moving ahead. Obviously, we need to educate the public. We should have done that like yesterday. So I'm not advocating deferring it to stop that.
Okay, this is Tom, and I think that what Nick is proposing makes a lot of sense. One of the goals of this is to inform us as the board in that decision-making process. So we do need this information, and maybe 30-day delay wouldn't impact that very much. But it was brought up the last board meeting that we're behind other local agencies that are looking at 218 elections. There was a reference to the city's 218. I can't remember what it was, utilities or something. So this is a priority. We've taken some major steps to get here, so I think we ought to keep pushing it forward. And I don't think that delaying it for a month would add to that process.
I'm prepared to make a motion along those lines, Scott. So you tell me what the best way to frame it is, but I move that we approve this task item with the understanding that there is additional refinement needed to the language of the scope, so that we don't run afoul of these rules against advocacy, and delegate the authority to sign off on that final language to Tom with your oversight, Scott. So unless feel free to finesse that, but I'm happy to make that motion.
That sounded great.
So a motion by Trustee Abdis.
I second. Oh.
Who wants it? Second by Jones. Thank you.
Yes. Tom Gilbert.
Yes.
Tom Gilbert, aye. Lee Reader.
Aye.
Lee Reader, aye. Abdis.
Aye.
Abdis, aye. Baines.
Aye.
Baines, aye. Barandis.
Barandis, aye.
Barandis, aye. Burns.
No.
Burns, no. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, aye. That's approved.
Motion approved. Thank you, everyone. And I will work with Tom and Scott and Allen Strategic to clean that scope up without substantially taking away, to the motion. So on item 6.2.
Just one thing for the record, and Jolene, please note this. We approved a draft scope. This is not a final. Thank you.
On item 6.2, Sacramento LAFCO, you have the opportunity to participate in the selection of a special district commissioner and special or alternate special district commissioner. Any discussion from the board on the candidates for that, or if you want to participate in the Sacramento LAFCO voting?
No discussion.
No discussion. Okay.
I don't have strong feelings on this one way or another.
Okay, so we won't participate if that's the pleasure of the board. We will not take action on item 6.2. Item 6.3, similarly, we have the opportunity to participate in Aqua's selection of president and vice president. Any feelings for this participation in their general membership vote for their president and vice president? Hearing none.
Yeah, similarly, no strong feelings on this either.
Likewise.
All right, no action taken on item 6.3. On to board reports and committee meetings. We did have an urbanization committee where we discussed our quarterly updates, as well as executive committee meeting, which was the special board meeting. Then we went to executive session. We did yesterday, yesterday, have the 2x2 meeting with Natomas Mutual. Appreciate the trustees making time on Veterans Day to meet with us and to meet with Natomas Mutual. Unfortunately, based on our internet coverage going down at the office, I believe our IP address changed. So I wasn't able to log into the server yesterday afternoon to get to my Word document to provide the meeting minutes from that. So I'll provide that in the packet in December. But just a oral update on the 2x2 meeting. We did meet with Brett Gray, general manager, as well as John Penning, one of their board members, and Vice President Matt Lupe. We did show our update on our aquatic sports center. On our that wasn't me, by the way. On our aquatic vegetation removal, Gabe had some good drone footage that was flown and saw the efficacy of our applications. At least two of the members from the Natomas Mutual appreciated the effort and recognized the benefits that RD1000 had put into this year's program. Largely, the program's predicated on a spring application of herbicides to control aquatic weeds, get the aquatic weeds taken care of early. We did not do a spring application last year as Gabe was just onboarded, and we just started talking about this program with Natomas Mutual in the first quarter of last year at our check-in with them then. And so we developed this robust program knowing that we wouldn't have a spring application. We did do a summer and a fall. And we will follow up this next year in the spring with a spring application, and hopefully, we'll hit it again in July, and then by the fall, it'll hopefully be pretty cleared up. So this has been a long building issue. And when I say long building, this took 5 to 10 years to get to the state that it's at, and hopefully we'll have it addressed in 18 months or so. So really appreciate Gabe's effort there. I do think that Natomas Mutual was pleased with those results, but Tom or Elena, if you want to chime in there, you guys were at the meeting as well.
It was nice to see our relationship with them grow, and it was nice seeing Matt Lupe in particular pay an interest in partnering with us in other avenues of our operation. That was pretty good.
So, and it spoke a lot to the benefits of having these Gabe reaching out to their field lead and coordinating things. So it was the most positive meeting I've been in with them ever. So very good. Well done.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on 7.11? All right, hearing none, I think that's the end of all of our items for today. There is no closed session.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Burns.
So before, I'm happy to second that, but I do want to make a statement here on an item not on the agenda, and I should have brought it up at the beginning, so I apologize. And Scott, tell me if I'm out of line here, but after that bomb cyclone hit, last month, there was a significant amount of water that came down to the basin, and I want to make sure that we extend our thanks to our crews. I mean, we have pumping plant number 3 that's down because of the core project right now. It provided for some scary moments, I think, out there, and I don't think people realize, how much work needed to be done to handle the volume of water that came in such a short period of time. And so I am a little concerned about the timing of the core project and taking some of these pumping plants out of line. Pumping plants 1A and 1B, really were the workhorses, and we have, I get them backwards. I don't remember if 1A is the old timer, but pretty dated. I think we spun a bearing. That pump went down, and really the other pumping pump was the only thing that was pumping water outside of the basin. So I felt like we dodged a bullet, and I want to make sure, Kevin, that you're working with Safeca and with the Corps to underscore the concern that we have, and really the precarious position we have been put in, because the buck stops with us. Those pumping plants are ours, and if we would have lost the other pumping plant at pumping plant 1, we would have had a serious problem. We would have had flooding. Roads would have been closed. The freeway would have been closed, I-80. So again, it's something that is concerning, and I would urge you to continue to work with the Corps and Safeca to see if we can figure out some redundancy and resiliency efforts while these pumping plants are brought down. Because if this storm event would have happened in March, where and the ground was saturated, we would have been dealing with a very different situation, because we would have had much more volume of runoff into our drains, and there's no way the pumping plant capacity could have kept up. So anyway, for what that's worth, I just want to make sure that that's on the record that I have some serious concerns here on this issue. So
yeah, Nick, thank you for that. And just to let you all know, immediately following that event, and once we kind of dried out a little bit and dealt with the outfall from that event in October, I immediately requested a meeting with Rick Johnson at Safeca. I did have that meeting on Wednesday afternoon with Rick and his staff, and strongly encourage them for the remainder of this year, as well as preparation work for next year for pumping plant 1A and 1B, that we phase those projects out so that we're not completely offline, that we do have a bypass system in place to handle those flows during their construction project. That really, we discussed a number of solutions as well, but it really, once it gets to construction with the Corps, we have to make sure that everything's in our contract documents and relocation agreements that put substantial risk transfer to them, and understanding that not just on a risk transfer standpoint, because we don't want to get there, that there's significant plans to address storms like this. And so Rick agreed. He's going to reach out and set up a meeting with myself and the Sacramento region construction manager. I encourage them to potentially fund another position at the Corps to process specifically for Natomas the requests for information that come through with the contractors, which seems to be a delay. You know, and despite all the assurances we have and the best efforts that we do, once it goes to contract and then there's delays, the contractor is saying, hey, you know, we've asked for this information, we're not getting it back. Therefore, we're stepping back from this. We told you the project would be done, but because of delays at the Corps and processing requests for information in a timely manner, has put us in this situation. So we're going to be very firm in the contract documents for, you know, the Reach A project, and make sure that we've made and that we're on record of having made these requests to not repeat what could have happened this year. So.
All right, thanks for that, Kevin. And I'd say please extend our deep appreciation to our crews out there too, please, just if that wasn't clear.
Yep, thanks, Nick. So a motion to adjourn by Burns and a second by Abdus. Any further discussion or? All right, Jillian, will you take the roll to adjourn?
I will. Trustee Gilbert.
Aye.
Gilbert, I. Lee Reader.
Aye.
Lee Reader, I. Abdus.
Aye.
Abdus, I. Baines.
Aye.
Baines, I. Barandis.
Brandis, aye.
Barandis, I. Burns.
Aye.
Burns, I. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, I. Motion to adjourn is approved.
All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time this morning and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.